Hello all, and welcome to this new channel I decided to start. Here, I'll be doing things like lists, race reviews, and other random things I can't think of while writing a script. For my debut episode, I thought of something that I haven't really seen anyone else compile like this. The top 10 F1 season collapses. Now, what is a season collapse? Well, simply put, a season collapse is usually when a sportsman's season starts really promising, or successful, and through whatever means it all fizzles out, crashes down, or in this case, collapses. I went through the years of F1 to pick 10 of the best cases that describe this plight. Let's start off with number 10. Number 10, Max Verstappen, 2019. I'm beginning with the most recent entry on this list. Max Verstappen is, today, one of Formula One's most popular drivers. Best characterized with his balls-to-the-walls racing approach and his huge legion of orange-dawned fans following him throughout the calendar, he's the sport's next biggest thing. But before he won his championship and a slew of races in between, he was known by many as the guy to be there when the then-dominant Mercedes team messed up. This was most evident in 2018 and 2019. He started off the latter season by absolutely obliterating his new teammate Pierre Gasly, often being a second faster than him and, somewhat famously, lapping him on his way to winning the Austrian Grand Prix. The highlight of his season was Germany. In one of the best races in modern history, he made 5 pit stops, spun on a greasy track, and made a timely call for dry tyres when the track started to dry out, to come through into the lead and never look back. As the rest of the field wrecked and spun behind him, he went on to win. Apart from that, the first half of the season was just filled with a lot of consistency, being the third best driver for most of the season. However, after the summer break came and went, Verstappen's form dropped considerably. It started with Belgium, where he hit Kimi Raikkonen at the first corner, broke his steering arm, and crashed at Reutemann. In Italy, he hit his future teammate Sergio Perez again at turn 1, lost a heap of time with a front wing change, and only finished 8th. Later, in Japan, he had another incident on the first lap, this time with Charles Leclerc, crashing with him on the outside of turn 1 and getting him his second DNF of the season. And in Mexico, he got pole for the race, but was stripped of it for ignoring yellow flags for Valtteri Bottas's crash. He then collided with both Hamilton and Bottas that race, got a puncture, and finished a lowly 6th. Max Verstappen went from being the threat to take second in the championship to just barely holding on to third in the end. The only bright spot of the second half of 2019 being a sensational redemption win in Brazil. He finished the season with 3 wins and third in the championship. But in the grand scheme of his career, one season collapse didn't amount to much. Number 9. Kimi Raikkonen, 2008. Before his first Ferrari stint starting in 2007, Kimi Raikkonen was seen as a bad fast driver being held back by terribly unreliable machinery. 2005 being the most painful example. Despite winning 7 races that year, he retired so many times that he finished second in the championship to Fernando Alonso. It all came together in 2007 after an extremely closely fought title between him, Alonso, and Lewis Hamilton. He beat both of them by 1 point to the championship. Unknowingly, he became the last Ferrari champion to date. Don't bet on Ferrari taking the championship anytime soon. A Ferrari moment. His title defense didn't get off to a great start, with a retirement from Australia, but he still finished 8th because so many cars retired. I'm actually going to put a pin in this race to cover it in the future. In fact, he rebounded solidly in Malaysia to win the race after his teammate Felipe Massa retired from the lead. 2 races later, he won in Spain in dominating fashion with pole and the fastest lap, as well as the podium finishes in Bahrain and Turkey for good measure. Unfortunately, he wouldn't win again all season. The collapse started in Monaco. With a very scruffy and incident-filled race, he finished out of the points in 9th. In Canada, he had the iconic pit lane shunt with Lewis Hamilton, where he hit him during a red light miscommunication, and both drivers retired immediately. In France, he led early on, but a flailing exhaust pipe meant that he slowed and lost the lead to Massa, settling for second. The reason I bring this up is that it's believed Ferrari deliberately sabotaged Kimi's race to get him to leave the team so they could sign Fernando Alonso for the sweet Santander dough. In Valencia, his engine exploded on the front stretch, giving him his third DNF of the season. None of these would compare to Belgium and Singapore. Late at Spa, rain fell down and him and Hamilton led on dry tyres. The two trundled round the track 30 seconds off the pace. Raikkonen took the lead from Hamilton, but performed the greatest ball in F1 history by immediately spinning afterwards and then stacking it in the wall at Blanchimont. Then, at Marina Bay, when he could have capitalised on Massa's pit lane error earlier that night, crashed out of the race at the Sling chicane, 4 laps from the end. DNF number 5. At that point, the championship was over for him. He instead watched his teammate Massa go to the finale with Hamilton and lose the championship with 1 corner left of the season when Lewis overtook Timo Glock, ironically in another wet finish to a dry race. He finished the season with 2 wins and tied for 3rd in the championship with Robert Kubica. He would never again get as close to winning the championship again, certainly not with Ferrari at least. He would just win 4 more races over the rest of his career before hanging up his helmet at the end of 2021. Number 8. Montoya 2003. Just like another driver from the Americas, Jacques Villeneuve, Juan Pablo Montoya was a very hyped up driver coming from IndyCar/kart straight to F1. He most notably won the Indianapolis 500 in 2000, before making his F1 debut with Williams in 2001. That year, he won as a rookie in Monza, but retired from a staggering 11 out of 17 races, including the first 4 races of the season, as the existence of the BMW Williams engine prevented him from actually finishing all the time. 2002 was a more low-key season. He went winless, but finished 3rd in points, only behind the dominant Ferraris of Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello. 2003 was his proper breakout season. The F2003 GA wasn't really faster than the Williams and McLaren, and a 3-team championship fight had been laid out. Montoya started out the season by choking under pressure at Australia, spinning out of the lead with David Coulthard bearing down on him, finishing 2nd. What's unique about this entry is that his season actually didn't pick up for a little while. He didn't get his 2nd podium until Monaco, when he won, but afterwards his season came alive. This was largely helped by the European heatwave of 2003, and the Michelin tyres that most of the grid were running performed better than the Bridgestones in extreme heat. He finished on the podium 8 consecutive times in the Europe leg of the season, including winning the German Grand Prix by an unbelievable 65 seconds. However, politics off the track would put an end to Juan's star run. What happened was that Ferrari protested the Michelin tyres, saying that they deformed too much and they had too much grip, giving the Bridgestone teams, Ferrari, an unfair disadvantage. Because the FIA have no backbone, and they always wanted to help Ferrari, it seemed, and despite the Michelins being perfectly legal since 2001, Ferrari got their way for Italy. Initially, it didn't look that bad. Montoya finished 2nd at Monza, but Schumacher went on a screamer for the rest of the season. For Juan, it would unravel so quickly. At Indy, he crashed with Barrichello just as it started to rain. He got a drive-through penalty for it, so couldn't change the rain tyres. His race never recovered afterwards, meandering into 6th place. And just like that, his championship was done. And just to add insult to injury, in the championship finale at Suzuka, his engine failed and he retired. He ended 2003 with 2 wins and 3rd in the championship, just like Raikkonen in 2008. This is probably the collapse that makes me the most unhappy. Yes, the 2003 Ferrari may just be my favourite F1 car ever, and Schumacher becoming the first ever 6-time champion that year was a landmark event. But it feels slightly unearned. What I'll say is that it seems a bit too perfect that the Michelin tyres were outlawed right when Ferrari started complaining. This is the best example of Ferrari international assistance for me, and for Montoya, it all went downhill from there. 2004 was miserable, as the Williams Walrus car was well off the pace. He saw this and jogged to McLaren for 2005, but got injured whilst playing tennis on a motorbike, or either one of them, and missed some races. He still won in that year. 2006 was the end. He didn't win a race in the first half of the year, and by Indy, where he won the 500 in 2000 and he lost the championship in 2003, he got caught up in a multi-car accident on lap 1 and then walked away from F1 immediately. He then went to NASCAR later in 2006 with Chip Ganassi. He won 2 races for the team over the years before moving away from that sport after 2014. He since won the Indy 500 again in 2015 and still competes part-time in IndyCar today at age 46. Number 7. Sebastian Vettel, 2018. I promise, this is the very last recent entry in here. Trust me, I hate recency bias just as much as the next scholared person in the sport, maybe I'll just put it. Sebastian Vettel is one of the most storied and successful F1 drivers ever, with 4 championships, 53 wins, and, as his fans don't shut up about, 9 straight wins in 2013 and the win in a Toro Rosso. We get it. Vettel with Ferrari, Toyota team, BAR Honda, and a good bit of Daniel Ricciardo's career are the biggest hyped up F1 things that didn't really amount to much. Vettel had a dismal quadruple title defense in 2014, not winning a race all year and vastly being outperformed by new teammate Ricciardo. Before the season was out, it was announced that he'd leave Red Bull for Ferrari in 2015. The first year together went well. 3 wins, and the only driver other than Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg to win all year. 2016, however, was much less successful. No wins, multiple bad strategy calls, Ferrari moment, and 1 dead meme of a remark to Daniel Kvyat. 2017 was new hope for Seb. He brought the fight to Mercedes frequently, won a bunch of races, and had a pretty good title challenge going until a double red wipeout on lap 1 in Singapore, and reliability problems in Malaysia and Japan. Ferrari moment. But the next collapse would put that to shame, and for me, ended Vettel's glory years once and for all in the process. The year started out near perfectly for Vettel and Ferrari, defeating Mercedes and winning in the first 2 races of the year in Australia and Bahrain. But in China, he had a clash with Verstappen that led him to an 8th place finish. Azerbaijan, he made a costly mistake, locking up while trying to go for the lead on a late race restart and finishing off the podium. But slowly, he came back again. Discounting crashing into Bottas at France, he got wins in Canada, but in the cheat engine, and Britain. He was once again battling with Hamilton for the race to 5 championships. July the 22nd, 2018, or, as I like to call it, the day Sebastian Vettel's career died. It was his home race, the German Grand Prix, and he was looking to win at his home race in Ferrari Scarlet, just like his hero Michael Schumacher did in 2006. He led away from pole at the start, but after half distance it started to rain. On lap 52, he slid off on dry tyres at the Sachs curve and gracefully nosed the barrier. He was out, and with the absolute despair of losing that race, the season, and the rest of his career, regressed. It didn't look so bad at the start, winning in Belgium, but that would be his last of the year. In Italy, he battled with Hamilton on lap 1, but in the second chicane, he hit Lewis side on and pendulum swung the back of his car. He only finished 5th. Think that was bad? In Japan, his team made a bad call in qualifying and he started relatively low down in the field. Ferrari moment. He was going through the cars, and when he tried to get Verstappen into the spoon curve, he hit the side of him and spun around. Again! Earning him just 6th place. We move on to Austin, and, say it with me, he battled with the Red Bull on lap 1, hit the side axle of it with his car, and spun around to the back of the field and finished a distant 4th. Hamilton sealed the championship with 2 races left in Mexico, as Vettel ended the season with 5 wins and 2nd in the championship. I know I may be sounding harsh here, but his season changed from one with good form and moans to a complete joke. In fact, some people still meme on him today for all the spins he had in the last years with Ferrari, though I do think that's reaching. He would only win one more race in his whole career, that being Singapore in 2019, before moving on from Ferrari to Aston Martin in 2021. He had little success there, and is now due to retire from Formula 1 at the end of 2022. And don't get me wrong, Vettel is a world-level driver, and he's had so many great times in F1, and he's gonna leave the sport with a great mark, but also somewhat a tainted one, and all the blame for that, I think, goes to 2018. Number 6. Carlos Reutemann, 1981. Okay, time to open up the Dusty Season Review DVD for this one. Throughout his career, the late Carlos Reutemann drove for some of the biggest teams in F1, getting his start with Brabham in 1972, before going on to drive for teams like Lotus, Ferrari, and most relevantly, Williams. Over his decade-long F1 career, Reutemann showed speed in whatever he drove, winning his first 3 races in 1974, a win at the Nordschleife in 1975, and then filling in for the injured Niki Lauda in 1976. He then went full-time for Ferrari for 1977, and when Lauda left Ferrari at the end of the year, Carlos became the team leader for 1978, his most successful year, winning at Brazil, Britain, Long Beach, and Watkins Glen. But they were no match for the ground effect Lotus 79s that year. At the Italian Grand Prix, Lotus second driver Ronnie Peterson was killed in a huge and fiery pileup on lap 1. Now, with a vacant seat for 1979, Reutemann jumped in to replace Peterson, but just as he had left, Ferrari went on to win the championship with Jody Scheckter, and Lotus fell down the order, but he would be back in a competitive car in 1980, joining Williams and winning at Monaco that year. But 1981 would be the tipping point of his career. He would start that year with a 2nd place finish at Long Beach. He then won at Brazil, but not without being told to let teammate Alan Jones by, and then disobeying the order, which infuriated the reigning champion, who never forgave him. But Reutemann pressed on, getting his 2nd win of the season at Belgium, as well as podiums at home in Argentina and Britain and Monza, and then the still new Imola circuit. There were some DNFs scattered throughout the year, but the collapse in the final 2 races was truly heartbreaking. It all started in Canada, after extending his lead to 3 points over Nelson Piquet Sr. When all was said and done in Italy, Reutemann qualified in 2nd place beside Piquet, but through the race fell to 10th and out of the points, while Piquet finished 5th. 1 point, the gap going to the finale. The final race will be held in Las Vegas at the all-new Caesars Palace car park circuit, the layout of which looked like a giant E, and the drivers complained of the toll of their necks that the left turns were taking. Reutemann and Piquet were the 2 in focus going into the race, as they could win the championship, but mathematically, Jacques Lafitte was also in the hunt. but was very much the outsider, so it was mostly Reutemann versus Piquet. Carlos took the upper hand when he got pole position, but then the race came, and for whatever reason, he fumbled greatly. His adversary, Jones, passed him. Then, Villeneuve, Prost, Giacomelli, Piquet, Andretti. He fell from first to 8th that race with gearbox problems, scoring no points 1 lap down, while his teammates scored the win in his last race in F1 until it wasn't, and the last win for an Australian driver until Mark Webber in Germany in 2009. Crucially, Piquet claimed 5th for the second time in as many races. It was all he needed. 1 point was the gap at the end. Gutted. The worst way to lose a championship had just bestowed the Argentinian, losing the lead at the final race by almost the smallest margin. Want something even worse? The season was actually due to start at South Africa instead of Long Beach, but due to Ferrari and other affiliates not turning up, it was declared a non-championship round. Had it been qualified in the season, Reutemann would have beaten Piquet to the title, 58 points to 56. Instead, he would end the year with 2 wins and second in the championship. He stuck around for 1982 to lead the team in the wake of Jones's retirement. Like 1981, he finished second in the season opener, but after the next race in Brazil, he stepped out of the team and the sport for good. There are 2 arguments for why he walked away. One being that he just didn't have his heart for the sport anymore after losing the championship in 1981 and became disillusioned with F1 as a result. The other being an external matter, as the Falklands War was being fought with the UK at the time, and he wanted to leave to pursue a career in politics. And that's what he did, becoming the governor of Santa Fe and considered running for president of Argentina in 2011, but didn't go through with it. Instead, he kept his role as the senator of Santa Fe, which he followed until his death in July of 2021. Number 5. Jarno Trulli, 2004. Jarno Trulli is a driver remembered for taking midfield cars and qualifying them extremely high, and his subsequent defences in the race coining the term Trulli train. He had already drove for teams like Minardi, Prost, and Jordan with limited success, but seemed to get a big break when he joined the returning Renault factory team for 2002. There wasn't a ton of good results, as his new teammate in 2003, Fernando Alonso, took all the spotlight and acclaim, but 2004 would be a much different season. The season got going with 5 points finishes in the first 5 races, with a podium at Spain, but the ultimate high of his career would be next time out in Monaco. He would take pole that race and be there when Michael Schumacher crashed with Juan Pablo Montoya in the tunnel. The rest of the race was incident-packed, but he and Jenson Button pulled away from the rest. But there are no places to overtake at Monaco, ultimately defeating the BAR by just half a second, becoming the first driver to win their first race in Monaco since Olivier Panis in 1996. In fact, he was the only driver other than Schumacher to win the first 13 races in 2004, but that would be as good as it would get. He would follow the Monaco win with several 4th place finishes, but the last of those is truly where it all came undone for Jarno. Fighting for the podium with Rubens Barrichello on the last lap, the Brazilian sent a dive bomb with corners to go and truly lost 3rd place as a result. The podium loss may have taken the wind out of his sails as a mid-season slump was on the horizon. It started with Silverstone, where, during the race, he had a huge accident out of bridge, hitting the wall and rolling violently into the gravel trap. In Germany, he would qualify in 7th, but would have no pace and fell out of the points to 11th. In Hungary, he only managed 9th in qualifying and his engine gave up the ghost on lap 41. In Belgium, he looked to get some mojo back by taking pole position for that race too. He led at the start, but crashed with Montoya at the bus stop chicane and spun round. He could only manage 9th. And in Italy, his home event, he again qualified in the middle of the pack and went on to get 10th. 5 straight races with no points. At that point, team boss Fabio Briatore had enough. Trulli was fired from Renault after Monza for poor performance and costing them second in the Constructors' Championship to BAR. The team brought in Jacques Villeneuve for the final races in 2004, but like Trulli, he failed to score any points. Meanwhile, for the Italian, he missed the Chinese Grand Prix, but a deal was struck with Toyota to start their partnership a little early. He did the last 2 races in the season for their team before he raced properly for Toyota in 2005. He ended the 2004 season with 1 win and 6th in the championship. Trulli would spend the rest of the decade as a midfield warrior with Toyota, getting the occasional pole and podium finish, but a win would never materialise with the Japanese squad. After the constructor left F1 at the end of the 2009 season, he went to new backmarker team Lotus in 2010. He scored no points as the car was so far off the pace. Bear in mind, the Lotus team he was with wasn't the Colin Chapman Lotus, but the new Lotus version HRT Lotus. Great story, by the way. He drove his final race at the end of 2011 before being replaced by Vitaly Petrov for the 2012 season. Not a fitting end to such an interesting driver. Number 4. Alain Prost, 1983. In terms of race approach, few drivers match Prost in the metric of intelligence. Unlike his biggest rival, Ayrton Senna, who would drive fast all the time and make ballsy moves, but crashing often, Prost was much more content with just playing it safe, getting as many points as possible, and doing what he needed to do to succeed. Prost was much more of a cerebral and smart racer, and that gets me a lot of respect for him. And as fans, I have more respect for Prost fans than Senna fans. It won him 4 championships and 51 races. He got his start from McLaren in 1980, but after just 1 season, he moved to Renault. He saw a lot more success in 1981. He won his first career race at home in France. He would also win again back-to-back at Zandvoort and Monza. In 1982, he won the first 2 races of the year in South Africa and Brazil, but wouldn't win again that year and finished in points. Then came 1983. He started the season inconsistently. Through the first 7 races, he traded a win and a podium with a sub-6th place finish. He won at home again in France, as well as at Belgium. He would then back that up with 2 more wins that year at Silverstone and Austria, and further podiums at Imola and Monaco. He was also getting frequently points on the board, and was leading the championship during the year as well. That would end starting at Zandvoort. Prost and title rival Nelson Piquet were battling into turn 1, but the 2 collided and then both of them retired from the race with damages. It got much worse at Monza. Prost retired again from that race with a turbo failure. Piquet, unlike last time out, finished the race. And he won. Prost was now just 2 points ahead of René Arnoux and 5 ahead of Piquet. Prost bounced back at Brands Hatch by finishing second, but Piquet made a consecutive wins to close to just 2 points behind Prost. The championship finale came at South Africa's Kyalami circuit. 3 drivers could still win the championship. Prost on 57 points, Piquet on 55 points, and Arnoux on 49 points. Though Prost and Piquet were the 2 favourites going in, Piquet and Prost qualified 2nd and 3rd respectively. Piquet took the lead off the start before Arnoux retired 9 laps in. Prost was running 3rd, trying to get more points to catch back up to Piquet in the championship. But on lap 35, he retired with another turbo failure. Prost watched the championship slip right through his fingers as Piquet finished 3rd, enough to get him his second championship by 2 points. Prost ended the season with 4 wins and second in the championship. This was a lot like Reutemann's collapse I mentioned earlier. It happened in the last races in the championship fight. The driver lost the championship in the final round by a small margin. Hell, it was even the same driver who did it to both. Alain would have to endure heartbreak in the championship many more times throughout his career. In 1984, he lost the title to Niki Lauda by 0.5 points. Still, to this day, the closest championship win ever. In 1988, he finished second to Senna, despite scoring more points than him that year. You see, this was because of a rule they had to combat, the higher retirement rate of the drivers, in which some of the races will not count towards the driver's year-end points total. So, for example, their best 11 of 16 results counted in 1988, the given season. Since Prost finished more often than Senna, Prost had to give up several second-place finishes, while Senna had to give up all of his DNFs. Prost actually scored 104 points that year, whilst Senna only scored 95. And I'll take the time here to say that Prost was far and away the better driver that season, and deserved the championship way more. And also, in 1990, when at Suzuka, Senna pile-drove him into turn 1 after, being moved to the wrong side of the grid deliberately, quote-unquote. But he would see glory in 1985, 1986, 1989, and 1993, before he retired to run a very unsuccessful team. Number 3. Lewis Hamilton, 2007. Lewis Hamilton is the statistical greatest driver in Formula 1. He is one of just 2 7-time champions in the sport's history, and with a litany of records to boot. He had a very quick start to his career, being brought up from GP2 in 2006 straight to frontrunner's McLaren for 2007, his rookie season. The expectations were seemingly insurmountable, but he somehow delivered. Hamilton finished 3rd in his first ever F1 race at Australia, as well as going on to get several podiums in a row, including 4 second places in a row. In Canada, he qualified on pole for the first time ever and survived an extremely chaotic race to grab his first career win, and then he did it again the next race in Indianapolis after holding off Fernando Alonso. He then went and won it again at Hungary, despite Alonso holding it up in qualifying deliberately and then earning a penalty for it. Yeah. Finally, he would win in an absolutely soaked Fuji Speedway that would absolutely not have gone green today. Belgium, Belgium, Belgium. Throughout the first 15 races of the season, he only finished off the podium 3 times, and had a commanding lead in the championship by the time the circus turned up to China. By this point, Hamilton was looking really likely to become the first rookie ever to win the championship, not counting Giuseppe Farina, who won the first ever championship in 1950. All he had to do was not mess up here, and he'd walk away with it. Hamilton started off the weekend well, by taking pole position for the race as well as keeping it on the wet track at the start of the race. But, as it dried out, McLaren didn't change his worn intermediates as they wanted to stick to a different strategy. Eventually, Lewis was second slower and had to come in. The team prepared dry tyres for him, but as he went into the pit lane, his lack of grip meant that he went straight into the gravel trap the pit entry had and got his car stuck in it, earning him his first career retirement. Now, with title rivals Alonso and Raikkonen scoring big points, all 3 would fight for the championship in Brazil. Hamilton still led going into the race with 107 points to Alonso's 103 and Raikkonen's 100 flat. He would qualify second for the race, the highest of the 3 men battling. On lap 1, Hamilton lost second to Raikkonen, and then went wide at Reta Oposta and lost some places. As he was trying to get all the places back throughout the race, his gearbox failed and he fell down the order. About 25 seconds later, he found the gears again and fired up his car and sailed off. But At this point, he was too far back to mount a proper comeback. Kimi Raikkonen had performed one of the great F1 upsets as he won the race and the title by 1 point from Alonso and Hamilton, who finished 7th. He ended the season with 4 wins and second in the championship, like Prost's 1983 season, though this time he was tied for second in the championship with Alonso, and like Prost's 1983 season again, he performed well all season, but lost the championship in the last 2 races from bad luck, but this time, human error as well, and I'm sure you Ham fans love that phrase. However, this would just be a small blemish on his career. He would go on to win the next season's championship in 2008, left McLaren for Mercedes in 2013, and then never looked back, winning the championship in 2014, 2015, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020, as well as 103 races overall. So he's an alright driver, all things considered. Number 2, Damon Hill, 1995. This is an unusual pick to put this high, as until the rest of the entries here, where the driver did well all season, only to have this one lasted a lot longer. Damon Hill has one of the most crazy F1 careers of any successful driver. He got his start with Brabham in 1992, right before they went under at the age of 31, before getting a deal to go to Williams in 1993, the greatest team in the sport at that time. He lost his maiden win multiple times, before winning multiple races in succession after that. In 1994, he battled with Michael Schumacher for the championship in a deeply tumultuous season that saw him miss out by a cat's ass hair. This is important to the story, or maybe it is. This may serve as a 95, or at least this season was supposed to be his resolution. The season started badly, in being he retired from on to win at Argentina, and then won again at a heavily revised Imola circuit. Spain wasn't as good, but he still finished 4th, and at Monaco, he couldn't do what his father, Graham, did 5 times and win, but 2nd was still a good result. This is where the season became properly embarrassing and wildly inconsistent. In Canada, Damon had a mechanical issue and then retired. After that, he finished 2nd at Magny-Cours from pole, then his home race at the British Grand Prix. He qualified on pole and led. On lap 46, he was catching up to Michael Schumacher in the Benetton on fresher tyres. He then made a big lunge into Priory, but Michael held his line and then Damon rammed into the side of him. He ended his day in the gravel trap. What followed next may be the lowest part of Hill's season. At Hockenheim, he qualified on pole for the 3rd race running. He led from the start, but on just the 2nd lap going into turn 1, his drive shaft failed and he was hurled into the barrier. Suddenly, his terrible form just disappeared as he took the win in Hungary from pole. He then finished 2nd in Belgium, losing the lead from Schumacher, who started 16th that day. History repeated itself at Italy. He qualified 4th and was running in 3rd in the middle of the race, before he creamed the back of Schumacher again while they were both trying to lap Taki Inui, legendary driver, and they both ended up in the gravel trap together. And who says Carlos Sainz is the one with an obsession with track runoff? For the last part of the season, Damon alternated between a retirement and a podium, before capping off his year with a win at Adelaide, 2 laps ahead of 2nd place Olivier Panis. Wasn't F1 just so much better in the good old days? After the season, which for the 3rd time in a row on this list saw 4 wins and 2nd in the championship, Sir Frank Williams decided that Damon would be replaced at the team by Heinz-Harald Frentzen for 1997, despite of which Hill went on to win the World Championship in 1996, which he hasn't stopped boasting about for the last 26 years. That's a joke. For 1997, he took the number 1 to Arrows, where he did nothing except come close to winning at Hungary. For 1998, he went to Jordan. Another option for him was McLaren. but they had maybe the weirdest contract ever for him, where he would be paid £1 million for every race win, but no other money outside of it. He goes winless and gets a second championship? Sorry, bro. Maybe just imagine your electricity this winter. He got his final career win in one of the all-time great F1 races at Spa, before losing the passion for the sport towards the end of 1999, and then retiring at the end of the season in his last race in Japan. He parked a perfectly fine car so he could just walk away in one piece. Not everyone can do a Rosberg at the end of their career. Now, I debated with myself on whether this should be at the top. I hate when people say this, but this pick may actually surprise some people. Yes, I have seen some regard this as a season collapse, but I doubt many would actually put this at the very tippy top, especially because how it played out. You may think I'm crazy, you may not, but it's my first video, it's my first episode, so I'm decided I'm gonna make an impression. Number 1, Jenson Button, 2009. By all measures, Jenson Button had a very slow start to his F1 career. He drove his first race for Williams in 2000, but was let go after just 1 year to make way for Juan Pablo Montoya. He moved to Benetton for 2001 and had little success, as well as when it rebranded to Renault. For 2003, he moved to BAR and didn't get his first podium until 2004, but that was the year where he broke through, getting many podium finishes and third in the championship behind the Ferraris. Yeah, it was one of those seasons. But for 2005, the BAR was way less quick and way more illegal. Fuel tank. 2006 saw the name change to Honda. Initially, the start of the season was quiet. Before in Hungary, after he had a grid penalty, and after a wet race that saw all of the top guys have very bad days, Button burned through and snagged his first win after over 100 starts in the sport. That win was no fluke either, as he was very consistent the rest of the year and scored the most points of anyone over the last 6 races of the year. But Honda went nowhere in 2007 and 2008, leaving Button to fade out again in the back of the field. And when Honda left the sport in December, he was without a drive and looked like just another driver whose chance had come and gone. Well, it looked like it, as during the off-season, Ross Brawn bought the Honda team their cars for £1, put a Mercedes engine in it, and got Button and Rubens Barrichello to drive the car, and the team turned up to Australia. Now, we all know what happens next. Ugh, another Brawn story? Are you serious? Well, not exactly. Yes, I'll be going through Button's 2009 campaign anyways, but I'm going to tell it from a different perspective. I'm not going to tell it as a fairy tale. It's an implosion. I mean, read the title. Australia was up first, and Button took pole position. Despite a messy season opener and crashes aplenty behind, he fended off Sebastian Vettel and Robert Kubica to win Brawn GP's first race. In their first race, in Malaysia, despite a bad start to the race, soon took back the lead, and when the race was abandoned after 31 laps because of the Heavens trademark, won again. China was a bit of a nothing race, as Red Bull were the faster car and won that event, but Button went right back to easy street in Bahrain by getting a comfortable win again. It was more of the same in Spain, and even more of the same in Monaco, but this time, it was Monaco and haha funny run to the podium. Finally, he won again in Turkey, and at that point, the new Brawn looked unstoppable. He had won 6 out of the first 7 races. What could go wrong now? Button had never had great luck at his home race in Britain. He never got on the podium before 2009 in that race, and With the rocket he had under him, it was bound he'd break his duck in spectacular fashion here. But Braun was not upgrading their car at all that year because of money, so the other teams had to catch up at some point. He would not win at Silverstone. In fact, he wouldn't even finish on the podium at Silverstone like he wanted to. No, he only finished in 6th, on pace. In Germany, he qualified in 3rd, but fell to 5th. In Hungary, he would be only 8th on the grid, and then 7th by the checkered flag. And then, followed by Valencia, would be another 7th place finish. And then in Belgium, he was eliminated in Q2, and then got torpedoed by Romain Grosjean in a pileup at Lake Como on the first lap, and damaged his car and got his first DNF of the year. To recap, he had 6 wins in the first 7 races. Now, he had 5 races without even a podium, only getting meager points positions and DNFs throughout. Thankfully, he would get back to the groove somewhat. In Monza, he would get 2nd in that race behind Rubens Barrichello, his teammate. But then at Singapore, he would qualify just 12th, and then would get 5th that race. But then, Suzuka, he would only finish in 8th. It just kept getting worse and worse, as the pack had now caught up in the championship, and Button qualified a low 14th. Well, title rival Barrichello went on to get pole for the Brazilian Grand Prix, but he went on a long recovery drive on Sunday, and then went on to finish 5th. Now, you may think, has he lost the championship lead yet? Did you just not mention it? Or is he going to suffer despair in Abu Dhabi? Well, he crossed the line at Brazil, and the gap to chaser Sebastian Vettel in the standings, 15 points. Jenson Button had done it. By the skin of his teeth, he had clinched the World Championship 1 race early. So, where was Vettel all this time? Well, he didn't win every race. In fact, he wasn't even that consistent when Button was down on speed, not getting as close as the Red Bull probably allowed him to, and that would give the Braun team the drivers and constructors as a result. He ended the year with 6 wins and 1st in the championship. And that, right there, is why this is number 1 on the list. All 9 others have had some sort of bad ending in terms of the season in isolation, but this was a bit different. Not all season collapses actually result in points collapse. Button led the championship for every race that year and won it in the end. And if you take a look at the results table on Wikipedia, you can see exactly when the Braun loses its speed. It was pretty much 50-50 on good and bad results. But because of the unique nature of this collapse, none could top it. For 2010, Braun sold up to the Mercedes factory team, and Button moved to McLaren. He would win some races over the next 3 years with the team, but would never come close to the championship again, peaking at 2nd in the championship in 2011. He would then win his final race in Brazil in 2012, get his final podium in Australia in 2014, and bow out of F1 at the end of 2016. Minus the 1 cameo race he did in Monaco 2017. So, where does that leave us? Well, I don't really have a moral here. Usually, I feel obligated to give some sort of lesson like, don't take anything for granted because it can all be gone in an instant. I mean, yeah, I guess you can draw parallels between these stories and that saying, but, at the end of the day, it's just sport, it's just a game. I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to me waffle, and then you will continue to listen to me waffle in an effort for me to try get this script to 7,000 words. Trust me, I'm so close. I hope you all enjoyed this list, and be sure to follow me. I'll definitely be doing more videos in the future like this, so I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all accompany me on this big journey. See you guys in the next one. Playing us out, we have nobody, because copyright.